Thanks, Manny and Betty. Thanks for inviting me to speak today. I'm really excited to share a program that we've been able to support in Maryland since 2021. So again, let me get my screen set up and we'll get going. Okay, then let me just do a couple of checks. That looks good. All right. Okay. So I'll be talking about an after-school cooking club that we call Meet Me in the Kitchen. To start off this portion of the presentation, a lot of the slides were presented at the 2023 Consumer Food Safety Education Conference in Arlington, Virginia, sponsored by the Partnership for Food Safety Education. So again, as you can see by the colorful photos, a lot of it is teaching youth how to try new foods, hopefully get them excited about cooking, and of course, give them some food safety information that they probably didn't realize they needed. So initially, Amy Callahan, she was a former SNAP-Ed colleague of mine up until this past year. She and I started this program in 2021, and we've had a lot of fun with it for the year that she helped me in 2021 to 2022. So we have the University of Maryland's information and our Justice for All posters. All right, so now we'll get into the thick of it. If you're not familiar with Maryland, we're just north of Washington, D.C., and Lakeland Elementary Middle School is in the southwest corner of Baltimore City. It's a high majority Black and Hispanic Latino population. And again, this program was about 9 to 10 weeks per fall semester, 9 to 10 weeks per spring semester. So we were doing this fall and summer or fall and spring of each school year since 2021. What started as a University of Maryland Agriculture and Natural Resource mini grant funded project became something else. When we received funding in 2020, we were looking at the school garden at Lakeland and trying to figure out how to do a pop-up farmers market. But then with COVID, things shifted and this became an after-school cooking club. So again, for Maryland, we know that about the youth here are a little bit more obese than the national average, and especially among those from minority populations. And so one of our thought processes was, since Amy was working really closely with Lakeland Elementary and Middle School, if we can bring a cooking club in, they might be learning some more skills and being able to make more informed decisions about the foods they choose at school and in their home community. So as you may know, working with middle schoolers and even fourth graders, because the program has been for fourth through middle school, is challenging. Again, we know that some of the students aren't as interested in reading recipes, measuring things out specifically. We also know that you don't necessarily have to measure ingredients to the proper cup to make food. But again, these are skill sets we wanted the children to learn. We also knew that classroom management was going to be difficult, right? The kids are in class, sitting, learning, and after school programs, they just want to move. They don't want to sit and listen to an adult talk to them even more. So we really wanted to cater a program where the students were involved in terms of designing it and then making sure that we weren't lecturing to them for too long so they could really be fully engaged in the program. Another thing that Amy and I have found was that there were other after-school programs. So as fun as cooking is, we were also competing with other after-school programs that some students might be in. So for example, other programs were basketball in the spring, chess club. But again, we had some really supportive teachers that helped recruit students for our cooking program. So our goal was, again, develop an infrastructure for Lakeland to start making good, healthy choices and learning more cooking skills, and of course, the food safety piece. For our initial grant project, we wanted to evaluate the experience of low-income students in a roughly 10-week hands-on cooking and nutrition-based program. So again, we had some exit interviews with students about what they learned and what they liked about the cooking program and what they would change. And that was really helpful. So for our goals, we really wanted to set the students up for success. We know that food safety isn't always something that's on a student's mind or even adults for that matter. And so Amy and I, and even some of the interns that came in to assist me with the class after Amy stepped away, we try to set things up so we could just go right into a demo by me, and then the students could go and start working in small groups on the same recipe. So here we have a photo of when they were getting ready to make gnocchi. So again, we made a potato gnocchi from scratch, and the students got to boil the pasta themselves. We made our own tomato sauce, but again, everything was, the mise en place was all set, and the students had a fun time cooking each week. So for Meet Me in the Kitchen, again, the grades shifted throughout 2021. I know I've mentioned middle schoolers, I've mentioned fourth graders. We've had the whole gamut through the past 5 school years. And so again, the activities were to help and reinforce good nutrition that they were learning from the SNAP Ed program in their school, as well as safe food handling. So we wanted to initially start the program around cooking foods from the school garden, but that wasn't always possible. The program is based off of the University of Vermont's food agency concept. So food agency is really the focus of one's ability to procure and prepare food within the context of their social, physical, and economic environment. So when you're thinking about Lakeland in particular, there aren't as many grocery stores. We know that it's a low income neighborhood. So what can the students make that is available within their communities and really make some healthy choices here? So the food agency framework is based on the desire to improve someone's everyday capacity when it comes to making meals. Dr. Amy Trubeck at the University of Vermont spearheaded this concept and has done a lot of research with other land-grant universities to figure out what really makes people cook more healthful meals. Again, when we're thinking about behavior change in the world of extension and even nutrition and food safety, food agency is going to involve self-efficacy, food-related attitudes, and capacity to navigate structural barriers around food and cooking. And so again, for Meet Me in the Kitchen, our first lesson was based on this concept of food agency, and it really helped guide us throughout the rest of the program. So just to give you an idea of some of the information in the Sensory and Organizational Planning Toolkit, we really focused on the sensory activity. So we wanted students to really have an understanding of flavor and taste and texture. So one of the first activities in UVM, which is University of Vermont's nickname, is a sensory activity. So we had students taste test different food items to see, as a whole, as a class, are they going to enjoy more sweet, sour, savory notes, and then also trying to expose them to more language in terms of how they describe those foods that they do like, or especially what they do not like. Instead of, no, I don't like it. Well, why don't you like it? Because it's soggy, it's soft, right? Those kind of descriptors. So again, we worked with our community liaison at Lakeland Elementary Middle School to work with the nurse to know if there were any food allergies that we should be aware of before we brought any food in for the program. So that was super helpful. And luckily, we didn't run into any students in the past 5 years with food allergies. So again, the workbook does give you some examples of how to do the taste testing. Even though food agency is geared more towards high school students and above, we were able to appropriately scale it for middle school and elementary school students. So with the help of Ms. Tate, one of the Lakeland teachers that assisted in the program a few of the semesters, we came up with a PowerPoint to kind of help guide us through this tasting activity for our first class. We also had a nice big printout of food safety expectations, so reminding students to put their phone or tablet away, tie back long hair, remove any jewelry. A big thing was making sure students took off their sweatshirts or oversized jackets when we were doing things in the kitchen so it wasn't dragging into the food. And then again, really making sure that they were washing their hands and being mindful of where they were putting their hands, because it's so easy for students to scratch their face, touch their friend, touch their hair, and then remind them to go wash their hands, please. So the students did a good job getting into a routine of putting their bags down and washing their hands prior to coming back into the kitchen space to have the demo and start cooking. So this is some of the photos that we asked kids, like, hey, do you like pizza or pasta, meatballs, and spaghetti? And so we would see where their flavor is gauged. We did similar things with different cuisines. And it was actually interesting because some of the students were really wanting to make Asian flavors. So they wanted to do dumplings, sushi, egg rolls, and some of the thing that I think I was surprised about was like, where are these students like having all these Asian influences for an environment that was a higher Hispanic and Black population? And when I asked, they said that they were all watching anime and reading anime books. And so they were learning a lot of Asian cuisines through their exposure through different media. So that I thought was pretty cool. And so we made sure that we did get in some Asian flavors as well each semester. Again, do they prefer sweet and sour and spicy or not so spicy foods? So again, for that class, we had them taste, and it varied each semester. Sometimes we would bring in some freeze-dried fruit, dried fruit. We also brought in some super sweet and sour snacks that were popular with students at that time, and just got to hear them talk about and describe what they liked, what they didn't like, and then what kind of foods that they wanted to make in the class. So of course you can imagine kids wanted to make the dumplings. They also wanted to make pasta and pizza were popular items. Again, pupusas, tacos were food items students brought up as well. And sometimes they would mention something that I haven't heard of, and they would show me on their phone what it was. I was like, okay, let me look into it, and we can see if we can add that to the list of what we're trying to do this semester. So in terms of planning, our contact from the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, and our Lakeland teachers worked together. We came up with a backbone in terms of backward sequencing about when the students would be coming into the class, when I would arrive to start setting up prior to the class coming in, because for the space that we were cooking in, there were no stoves, there wasn't even a sink in the room. We really had to work smart to make sure that we were able to get things sterilized and clean prior to the kids making their food, and then having a game plan too after for cleanup to clean and sanitize equipment afterwards. So again, we had a small window to really work with the students in the after school program. And so how can we make some of these dishes that might take a little bit longer than what they were hoping to make? So again, as you're looking through the table, we really focused on knife skills early on. We would have them make a soup and call it a farmer's market soup. So I would go to our local farmer's market, and Baltimore does have one that's year round, so that was helpful, and try to buy vegetables of all the different colors of the rainbow. And so during those first couple of weeks, the students got to practice proper knife skills, using a knife, and really making a tasty soup. After that, depending on what the students were interested in. Again, we made gnocchi from scratch. We used forks for them to roll the dough down the line to make the ridges. And if you do make gnocchi for any after school program or in school program, I would recommend pan frying it instead of boiling the water, because the gnocchi sizes that the students would roll, even when you told them pencil thin, would vary, and a pan fry will cook a lot faster when you have time limitations than a boiled water variation. You can see that a lot of the recipes we would try to do twice back to back so the kids had a sense of mastery. Sometimes that second week I would bring in something else that would be another element, maybe a little bit more involved and had more food safety procedures. So if we made dumplings one week, maybe the next week we would do one with a meat filling. Same thing with gnocchi. We did gnocchi and we made our own tomato sauce. The second week they would still do that, but we would also include meatballs. And some of the students were saying like, hey, I really want to cook meat. And so later on, we got to the point where I would bring in fish, typically salmon, some sort of beef steak, and sometimes lamb if it was on sale to cook, because then the kids really got to use food thermometers, practice temping, and we got to have discussions about not washing chicken or other meats. And so they really enjoyed cooking real food in that sense. Other things that went through the thought process in making the menu was assessing the risk of each recipe. So again, we didn't have to worry about any allergens, but then we did need to think about, okay, what is a meal that they can contribute towards where everyone eats from the same pot? Or what are those foods that we individually prep so then all their germs theoretically stay on their plate? So on the left, we have a photo. It was right around Halloween. So the kids got to make jack-o'-lantern lasagna where we had enough little toaster ovens that we were able to have the kids make their jack-o'-lantern face in the pepper, clean it out, and do the layers of cheese, tomato sauce that we made, and bake them. So that was popular. And they were able to keep their individual stations clean. And again, even though there was a kill step with the baking, they had their own space to work prior to that. On the right, we had them make jam one time. And so again, if you're not familiar with canning, when you're making jam, you're going to cook everything down before putting it in the jars and having those jars going through a boiling water bath. So again, there's two places where you have two kill steps, and that was a pretty safe recipe where the kids could squish the strawberries either by hand or with a masher, and then again, a little bit more peace of mind for what they were going to bring home and share with their family. So other activities that the students would always need a refresher on was hand washing. One student during the exit interview said he didn't realize how many times he needed to wash his hands during cooking. And I think even adults don't realize how many times we need to wash our hands after touching shelled eggs, after touching meat, if you check your phone, right? So there's so many learning points during an after school cooking program to remind students, hey, please go wash your hands. Again, for one of the dumplings, we did a peanut filled dumpling. The students made the dough from scratch. They filled it. And again, we didn't have a peanut butter allergy within our students, but after that class finished up, Amy and I did a thorough spot check to make sure floors were wiped, and even checking, as you can see in the photo on the right, the wheels, because somehow peanut butter got up on the wheels, and cleaning that thoroughly before students came in the next day for class. So again, just being aware of the environment and who else is using that shared space. So for integrating food safety, again, we have some recipes that we've done over the years and how they fall into the four core of clean, cook, chill, separate, and any other unique aspect. So again, with French toast, we wanted students to wash their hands. Again, for that one, it was keeping eggs separate from other ingredients. Pizza, the unique one was just a flour in terms of a wheat allergen, because again, we didn't want students tossing pizzas in the air and trying to be fancy and getting flour all over the art room. So this was kind of how we thought about food safety in terms of each recipe. So again, for the gnocchi, for example, we did once with carbonara sauce, and you can see that the gnocchi that the students rolled are a little thick, and it just varied in terms of how long it took to boil, especially when you have a class from 6 up to 12 students trying to put all their gnocchi in one pot of boiling water. So that was marginally successful until we moved to the pan frying, and that's been a lot better. But again, students got to use dough. A lot of students said it reminded them of playing with Play-Doh growing up, and making sure that we had the proper equipment so they could feel like they were really cooking. So I had induction burners. We definitely blew out a couple of electrical sockets that needed to be reset, which didn't always happen that semester or full school year. And I would always bring a backup butane burner as well, just in case things with the induction burners didn't go as planned. So having that backup. So in terms of some of the semi-structured interviews or exit interviews with the youth, it was IRB approved by University of Maryland down at College Park. And so we did try to get at some of the self-efficacy, food safety, and self-reflection. Again, some of the students loved the food item that we made last week. So when we asked them what was their favorite recipe during a 9 to 10 week section, it was normally what they made last week, which was interesting to see. A lot of them did have a good sense of food safety. They enjoyed using meat thermometers. Again, I mentioned earlier about how many times you need to wash your hands, and they also brought up that you don't need to wash or rinse chicken or other meats as well. And since the fall of 2021, again, we've had a lot of success. Now, we've had a bit of a pause in the fall of 2025, just because we had changeover with our University of Maryland, Baltimore County point of contact with the school. And so it did take a semester for me to make contacts with the school administration to say like, hey, I'm here. Can I come and teach a canning, or not canning, but a cooking club that we've been doing? So that did take time to make those inroads. I was fortunate enough that Brian from the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, did all the communications and liaisons with the school. We would talk and say like, all right, I'm coming in for Monday. Here's the time. The school is recruiting students. Let's come up with our schedule, and we'll figure out what we're doing in terms of budgets and costs. So I've had a lot of help with interns through the Family Science Department at Towson University, as well as some paid school workers at Lakeland that were helping to assist some of the after-school programs. So for some of the exit interviews, and obviously we didn't do exit interviews with every semester group of students, but for the early ones, just to see if this class should continue, a lot of the students were, well, actually half of the students identified as female, half of them were male, so that was nice to have. They also identified as Black, and about 50% Latinx. So in terms of the general themes, students really learned new cooking skills that they could take home. Just with conversations with Brian and some of the parents that he talked with who had students in the after school program, he heard that The students were able to use knives more. They were able to help their parents around the stove a bit more. So that was helpful. Students also said that they would talk to their parents about what we cooked, and even some of the food safety best practices too would get into those conversations. Some kids felt that they were able to regulate their behavior a little bit better when they were in the cooking club. They learned how to share and take turns a bit better as well. So those were really nice things to hear from some of the students. So again, hopefully some of the students would make these meals again at home. Um, Amy and I, and for the program thereafter, we didn't do a lot of recipe reviews. We did share recipes, sometimes in English and Spanish, but a lot of times the kids left those recipes on tables, so that phased out pretty quickly. But again, we were able to show them how to measure liquid ingredients as well as dry ingredients. And here, year after year, I saw that the students were really good with preparing food with their hands. So making naan, making pizza dough, making pasta all from scratch. They were able to do that with ease and efficiency by the end of their about 10-week cooking club. So again, even though that's a thin piece of meat, students had fun using the cooking tools like the food thermometers. Again, we talked about marinating foods, Maillard browning, and so they had fun flipping the meat and cooking it and taking turns using the food thermometer and letting the meat rest so the juices could redistribute. So there were plenty of good learning moments that they had each week in their small cooking groups. It was nice to see students using pretty good knife skills, and I know that's something that with more practice, they'll get better at. So sometimes we would have them do long slices, dices, not necessarily minced, but we did have some cutouts and laminated pictures of different styles of cuts that they might want to emulate for some of the different classes. As you can see, we didn't always have students wear gloves, especially if they were going to be preparing something that they were eating themselves, or if that vegetable or fruit was going to have a kill step later on. So again, the students really helped to dictate how the class was going to run from what they wanted to make. It was really my job to make sure the logistics seemed seamless for the time frame that we had with all the students. Again, there was a lot of wonderful learning opportunities to incorporate food safety. The bulk of it was really washing hands and using meat thermometers. And so we saw students that really didn't know much about cooking really flourish towards the end. So again, knife skills from repetition was really important to us. Kids really wanted to work with meat and other proteins. A lot of them were familiar with tilapia, so bringing in something that was different from the fish that they were typically cooking was a goal. Some students said they really enjoyed seafood, told them we didn't quite have the budget for lobster, but again, trying to buy, as you know, the paper goods in bulk, the utensils in bulk to help save costs down the line, and then just trying to be mindful of what we were buying each week for the number of students. So I think in terms of cost, each class for 6 to 10 students was probably about $50 in terms of groceries. So if you have questions, feel free to ask me, but I'll just share some photos here. Again, students did some stir fry. They got some of the students really enjoyed taking their time with their knife skills. Again, on the right is a picture of a recipe for a veggie quesadilla that we started, and then realized that the recipe math and reading the recipes wasn't going to happen too well, and we shifted to more of that demonstration space. So here again, we have the cooked veggie lasagna during Halloween that they did, and on the far right, we can see how they were making their own pizzas. I would bring in my own personal pizza oven, and the kids would get to go out with me and see the pizza cook live. And it was interesting because the first time we made pizza, a lot of the pizza was just in the garbage. And I was surprised because they talked about how much they wanted to do pizza. And I realized that the problem was that they didn't have a box to bring the leftover pizza home in. So what we wound up doing the following semester was that I bought 12-inch boxes, pizza boxes, and that eliminated the food waste problem. So again, students had a really good time making pizzas, making soups, and other food items that they were curious about in terms of how to make it. So again, we did let them do some sweets. In one class, we did waffles. Again, they got to practice their knife skills with slicing the strawberry and fanning it out nicely. And so, again, the kids really had a good time with what they were cooking each week. So I will stop there, and I'm happy to answer some questions.